The newest trailer for Disney Plus's television series WandaVision has recently dropped, and there is a lot going on in it. A lot of fast cuts, a lot of hidden characters and props to analyze and pick apart as we try to figure out what it all means. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. WandaVision is a series that centers around Wanda Maximoff, aka the superhero and Avenger known as Scarlet Witch, and her romantic partner, Vision, an artificial intelligence given life by the Mind Stone, who we saw die during the events of Infinity War, killed by Wanda herself, and then brought back to life using the Time Stone only to be killed again by Thanos, and who is also an Avenger. The television series seems to have a name that fittingly refers to what exactly it will be about on multiple levels. For one, it appears as though it is a reference to television, and various different sitcoms and TV shows which, number 2, have possibly inspired Wanda to create her own vision of reality, using her reality warping powers. And of course, the name also refers to the lead characters of both Wanda, played by Elizabeth Olsen, and Vision, who is played by Paul Bettany. Today we're going to be taking a look at the newest trailer for the series as we count down the top 10 WandaVision Easter eggs. If you love all things Marvel, check out our exclusively Marvel playlist by clicking on over here, filled with our most marveliest of videos. And be sure to stick around to the end of this list where I will have some bonus content coming your way in the form of comment responses. Alright, now let's get counting. It's my own version of chaos magic. Now we count. Number 10. Bewitched. The more we dive into the classic 1950s to 60s vibe for at least part of the show, the more we get constant parallels to the American television sitcom that ran from the mid-60s to early 70s, Bewitched. This classic show also started out in black and white and followed Samantha Montgomery, a witch who met, fell in love with, and married a mortal named Darren Stevens. The show follows their crazy adventures as Samantha struggles to fit into the mortal world and to live the life of an everyday normal housewife. Also, if you're like, what about I Love Lucy, Amanda? We're getting to that. Number 9. AGATHA HARKNESS. You may have noticed at the beginning of the trailer if you were watching with subtitles on, side note, this is another reason that I love subtitles, that the nosy neighbor character of Wanda and Vision, played by Kathryn Hahn, is named Agnes. Many fans think this name could be a covert name for the famous witch from Marvel Comics, Agatha Harkness. Not only does her name seem to be similar to Agatha, but we also see Agnes dressed up as a witch for Halloween in the trailer. Very interesting. Comic fans of Wanda Maximoff will likely note that Agatha Harkness is known for not only being a powerful witch, but also for being a teacher to Wanda when it comes to mastering her hex magic. Number 8. Maison du Mépris. You may or may not have noticed a very focused shot on a wine bottle in the trailer. Wanda appears to be using her magics to make itself pour, giving us a clear look at the label on its front. It reads Maison du Mépris, which translates from French to English as the House of Misery. This is not only telling for Wanda's and Vision's story to come, but could also be a reference to the famously tragic House of M story. Maison du Prix, House of Misery, House of M. Just saying. Number 7. Mr. and Mrs. Hart. Adding a nod to I Love Lucy, another famous retro-American sitcom featuring Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, who were married in real life for 20 years and had a very rocky marriage. Mr. and Mrs. Hart are characters we see Wanda and Vision having dinner with in the show, and while some believe they could be Wanda's subconscious trying to break through this fantasy world and get Wanda to face reality, it also appears that Fred Malhamad and Deborah Jo Rupa's characters of Mr. and Mrs. Hart are a reference to a similar relationship that Lucy and Ricky's characters had with their neighbors Fred and Ethel in I Love Lucy. Number 6. The Twins. In the trailer we also spot a shot of Vision and Wanda carrying 2 babies, each with one in their arms. It appears the show may be featuring Wanda's magically created, yet fake, babies, who are later confusingly reincarnated in the Marvel Universe and are acknowledged as being Wanda's children, while also still having their own different birth parents and families. The twins in the comics, which Wanda created using her willpower and reality warping powers, are known as Billy and Tommy. Tommy is now known as Thomas Shepard, codenamed Speed. He has white hair and takes after his fake uncle, Pietro Maximoff. He's super speedy. Billy, on the other hand, takes after his mother. In the comics, he is now known as Billy Kaplan, aka Wiccan, a magic user with reality warping powers, who recently got married to fellow hero Hulkling. So cute! Both are mutants despite the fact that Wanda and Pietro had their mutant heritage retconned in the comics. Number 5. Original costume. Yes! I love that we get this Easter egg in here and that we can expect to see it in the series. We get a shot featuring Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda in her original costume. Now, it appears to be a potential Halloween look just based on where she's wearing it and the quality of the costume, which admittedly looks like a pretty high-level Halloween costume, but not quite cinematic level. Still, I'm super excited to see her rock this original costume look for Wanda in the series. It's one of my favorite costumes around. I always love a good, strange, and not really functioning headpiece in a costume. Number 4. Reality warp. Not only do we have that wine bottle to give us a hint that Wanda might be having a psychotic break and creating a fictional alternate reality for everyone to live in, we also get many clear moments where this is implied. From moving through countless decades of fashion and interior design, as well as stylized shots, to a specific moment that we see in the trailer between Vision and Agnes. She seems to be stuck in a trance, which Vision snaps her out of by lightly shocking her. Agnes looks startled to see Vision and asks, "Am I dead?" Vision, puzzled, answers no, why? And she responds, cackling, "Because you are." We also see a shot of Vision's skin turning from gray to red, suggesting that Wanda has brought him back from the dead, but perhaps not really. We could, after all, be living in a false reality which Wanda's powers have created. But how long will that last? Number 3. Vision's cape. Not only does Wanda seem to be rocking a Halloween costume version of her original look, but Vision also gets an amazing and comedic one, complete with his dramatically colored bright yellow cape. This costume made its first appearance alongside Vision in the original Avengers series, Volume 1, Issue 57 out of 1968. I seriously am in love with all these Halloween vibes, and I hope these aren't the only original Halloween looks that we get to see. Hopefully we'll be treated to a few other comic book supers' original looks via Halloween costumes maybe worn by residents in this sleepy town which Wanda and Vision seem to have taken up residence in, or which Wanda has created. Number 2. Captain Marvel 2. Near the end of the trailer we get an amazing surprise. We can see a character flying through the sky through some kind of force field, possibly what houses or protects Wanda's imaginary world, and landing at the feet of government agents. That character is played by Teyonah Parris, who has been confirmed as playing grown-up Monica Rambeau. What does this mean? Likely that WandaVision will have some kind of ties to Captain Marvel's story, potentially weaving into the plot of Captain Marvel 2. Monica Rambeau in the comics was actually the first woman to wear the Captain Marvel mantle, but in the MCU, where she was introduced as Carol's best friend, Maria's daughter, it is likely that we'll see her take up another mantle and potentially work alongside Carol, possibly as Photon, one of her superhero mantles which was hinted at in the first film. Number 1. S.W.O.R.D and Darcy Lewis. The government agents that Monica Rambeau seems to collapse in the ground in front of, many believe they're meant to be the S.W.O.R.D organization, who will be taking the place of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the MCU. Though in the comics, S.W.O.R.D are more a branch of S.H.I.E.L.D. which deal with monitoring and responding to intergalactic threats. S.W.O.R.D stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department. During this shot, you might have also missed the reappearance of a very familiar and long absent character, Darcy Lewis, played by Kat Dennings in the MCU. I love Kat Dennings. Darcy was the friend of Jane Foster, one of the world's most brilliant astrophysicists and Thor's love interest. Darcy was Jane's friend, assistant, and her intern, and worked alongside both Jane herself and her professor, Eric Selvig. You can just barely make her out in the background, but hey, she's there. Slow down the trailer at around 1 minute and 6 seconds to see if you can make it out for yourself. It seems Darcy will be joining S.W.O.R.D, or at least working with them, potentially attempting to assess the threat that Wanda's reality warping powers pose to the world. I cannot believe how fast WandaVision seems to be moving and flying past us all. And yet, the more we learn, the more questions and theories we all seem to have. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Today we are going to be taking a close-up look at the past few episodes of WandaVision, and more than that, examining some of the more bleak and horrific theories pertaining to the show as we count down the top 10 dark WandaVision theories. Get ready, because between the comic book inspirations and speculative MCU directions, it's about to get pretty dark in here. Alright, let's get counting. Number 10. S.W.O.R.D? In the comics, S.W.O.R.D stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department. However, in the MCU, it's been revealed to stand for Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. While this was speculated to have been the name before Episode 4 was released due to the appearance of that version of the acronym on a Topps card, the name actually would not appear until Episode 4 in the show. Just thought I would clarify those two names and where they're from, as on my S.W.O.R.D list where I talked mostly about the comics, many people felt felt the need to correct me. And I know that the MCU has a different acronym, so just so y'all know. But the question is more why? Why is the acronym different? Especially as upon Monica's return to the division, she seems to imply that it was meant to be a space and astronaut program, even suggesting that S.W.O.R.D changed the acronym possibly in the MCU from world to weapon. And they never say that in the show, but it seems to be a little implied. As such, I have a theory that this MCU version of S.W.O.R.D and director Tyler Hayward might actually not be the good guys that they appear to be, and that after Maria Rambeau's death, perhaps something more sinister happened in terms of the organization's direction, as they shifted their focus from protecting Earth from space to creating and monitoring weapons. Very interesting. Perhaps even causing them to create the events of WandaVision themselves through monitoring Scarlet Witch to the point that she suffered some kind of a mental break. I mean, I'm just saying, as Monica said in the show, aren't we supposed to be like observing, not creating weapons? And it does look like they were kind of creating a lot of weapons in that warehouse. Number 9, Nora and George. Mr. and Mrs. Hart in episode 1 already became victims to what appears to be the power of Wanda's influence. When she found herself unable to recollect her and Viz's story, we saw her likely accidentally take out her frustration on Arthur Hart, causing him to choke and causing his wife Mrs. Hart to kind of be stuck in a really creepy loop. In the end, Wanda urged Vision to save their guest and his boss, Arthur, and all was well. But with WandaVision, we seem to also be seeing quite a bit of influence from another comic series featuring Vision and his happy, normal synthezoid family, Tom King's Vision series out of 2016. If the show continues along this path, it definitely won't be good for their neighbors, as in issue 1 of the series, we learn that 2 neighbors who paid them a visit, Nora and George, who kind of show some similarities to Mr. and Mrs. Hart in my opinion, ended up being killed by a member of the Vision family, who set their house on fire while they were asleep. Yikes! Sounds like the Harts, who we later learn are actually Sharon and Todd Davis from the main reality, got lucky in episode 1. At least they didn't get set on fire. Number 8. AIM. While the Beekeeper was explained in episode 4 of WandaVision, I'm still not entirely convinced that AIM won't be appearing at some point in WandaVision. AIM has been hinted at across board in the MCU and also has been quite present in the Marvel games, Marvel Strike Force, as well as Square Enix's new Marvel's Avengers. The radiation suits that the S.W.O.R.D agents wear also seem to be oddly reflective of the AIM suits. For those not familiar with AIM, we did a list on that organization a little while ago, which you can check out, but in the comics, just so you know here, AIM actually stands for Advanced Idea Mechanics, which doesn't sound bad, but yeah, they end up being evil. If you know MODOK, MODOK is actually from AIM and was created by them, although he originally was supposed to be about computing, not killing, but here we are. And before we move on to our next point, just a quick little reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you like it when we talk about cool MCU stuff like WandaVision. I know I like it. Number 7, Agatha Harkness. A powerful witch in the comics, many believe that Agnes in the show is in fact none other than Agatha Harkness in disguise. You'll also notice that in episode 4 of the show, she was never mentioned as being any of the residents of Westview who actually were missing people that had been sucked into the show within the show that is also known as WandaVision. WandaVision in WandaVision. WandaVision. Agatha is also tied to the birth of Wanda's twins and also was responsible for wiping Wanda's memories of them after they were gone. Agatha also did not stop Mephisto from reclaiming the fragments of his soul, which were actually used to create the children. So yeah, sounds pretty bad if she's here. Gonna be pretty evil. Number 6, Mephisto. Going off that last point, if Agnes is Agatha and the twins do actually exist and were created by Wanda using magic and stolen soul fragments, it's very well likely that this means we could be seeing Mephisto introduced either later in the show or as a result of it. Mephisto is, after all, where those soul fragments originated. For those who are unfamiliar, Mephisto is a powerful demon who is often thought of as Marvel's version of the devil. Although with Damon Hellstrom existing, it's kind of implied that Damon's father, not Mephisto, is actually Satan himself. So like the devil. All in all, I think just there are lots of demons who claim to be the one and only devil. But in Marvel, in fact, there are multiple demons who rule various dimensions belonging to hell. So there is no real, like, devil. Just a lot of demons. Number 5, Zombie Vision. Near the end of episode 2 and during episode 3, we got a bit of a peek at what could really be going on with Vision, and it appears that Wanda could potentially be reanimating Vision's dead corpse and projecting memories and illusions onto him in order to make him appear and act like he was still alive. Does Wanda know that she's doing this though, or is someone else potentially doing it? Based on what we know of Wanda's character from both the comics and the MCU, it's likely that this is actually Wanda's doing, but that she was simply trying to initially bring Vision back, and based on her unstable powers or chaos magic, something went dramatically wrong, as it usually does when she tries to do crazy magic things. Number 4, House of M. A lot of people have theories that this is where we are headed when it comes to the plot of WandaVision, that this entire reality is all a fabrication of Wanda's because she had a psychotic break and refused to accept reality. While I definitely think there is inspiration from House of M that the show is taking from, I sincerely hope it isn't quite as cut and dry as all that, and that there is more going on. While fans also have theories about how WandaVision will end, many of us, myself included, believe that instead of Wanda getting rid of mutants, she will bring them into the world. I only hope that Scarlet Witch and potentially Quicksilver, if he returns, will get to be included in what is later classified as mutants once more. Give me my Maximov mutants, please. Give them to me. And if they come back into the MCU, then maybe they could come back in the comics. Number 3, no mutants. Well, those theorizing about House of M are thinking it could be reversed in the end to introduce the mutants instead of depriving us of them like it went down in the comics. What if this doesn't happen? What if instead we don't see any mutants at all and this simply isn't a part of the story that comes about in any way? So like no more moment appears at all. Then what? Some are theorizing that for mutants to be introduced, we might actually need more time for them to be integrated. So we might not see them in WandaVision or even see them at all in the MCU within like the next 5 years of development. Is this a more scary possibility? You bet, because I want my MC mutants right now. But I also respect that when you're making movies and all of that stuff takes a lot of time, and also, there's like a global pandemic, so yeah. Number 2, the Visions. Tom King's 2016 Vision series is definitely one that also seems to have influenced the show. There are elements of horror and themes of uselessness here that we see reflected in it. And don't misunderstand me there. I'm not saying the show is useless. I'm saying that there is a theme running through it of uselessness or frivolity, similar to the comic series themes, which we see symbolized in objects like the vase that was gifted to Vision by Silver Surfer, a floating vase basically made from a material that's poisonous to flowers, meaning that it's a vase in name alone. Similar to the Visions as a family, it's kind of a symbol for them. And the Visions are also similar to likely the fake family that we see Wanda manipulating reality here to create. Because it's not real. Number 1, Wanda becomes the new villain. In the 4th episode of WandaVision, we get to see a part of the scene that we basically missed between Wanda and Geraldine, aka Monica Rambeau, when Scarlet Witch uses her power to banish Geraldine from Westview, kicking her out after she discovers that she was an intruder and a S.W.O.R.D agent. This allows us to see a different side to Wanda we haven't yet seen in the show, one that seems ruthless and even malicious. It seems Wanda will go to great lengths to protect her new family, and just like we saw with House of M, many believe we'll actually see Wanda play the role of more of a villain if people try to break the reality that she has created around her. Can you really blame her though? Because I feel like I'm kind of on Wanda's side a lot of the time with this stuff. I mean, breaking this new reality would likely mean she'd have to give up her newborn babies and Vision, so I feel like, that would suck, so she's not gonna want to do that. What hasn't happened to Scarlet Witch when it comes to awful things? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. When it comes to Scarlet Witch, she has had one of the most tragic character evolutions in all of Marvel, and one of the wildest and most turbulent origin stories, which have also changed quite a lot over the years. Today we're going to be revisiting some of the most terrible comic book moments from this poor woman's history as we count down the top 10 worst things that have happened to Scarlet Witch. And if you want that part to be sure to let me know in the comments below, because there are definitely a lot more horrifying experiences in Wanda's past for us to dredge up if you so wish. For now, here's a top 10 tasting. Number 10, being named Traitor. As awful as this one is, it ranks a little lower on our list because, well, Wanda kind of deserved this one. After the events of House of M, Wanda was seen as one of the biggest mutant traitors around, still being believed at this point to be a mutant. Oddly enough, Scarlet Witch was one of the few prominent mutants in comics who has never been part of the X-Men team, and was really only an Avenger. If you're wondering why that is, a big part of it in the later years has to do with mutants hating her due to the fact that she basically wiped them from existence with her wish of no more mutants, which we now refer to as decimation. Well, that and she was initially too busy serving on her father's villainous team of mutants, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Still, although she did earn the title Traitor, much of what has happened as a result of House of M happened because of basically how harshly people were treating Wanda. So, although she earned the title Traitor, it still feels a little harsh to say that she entirely deserved it. I've always thought of Wanda as more of a misguided villain when she plays that role, as opposed to a true and sincere villain in the comics. Number 9, cast as a villain. To expand on our previous point a bit more, a few of the worst things that have happened to Scarlet Witch usually involve her being cast in some kind of villainous role, despite the fact that she is truly a hero when it all comes down to it. Scarlet Witch only ever wants to do what's best, and usually it's some kind of outward manipulation or force that turns her momentarily evil or causes her to break down and commit some kind of heinous action. It does make for some pretty interesting stories, but it's pretty awful the number of times and how severely Scarlet Witch has been used in this way by others and when it comes to storytelling. Number 8, betrayed by her fiancé. Remember when Wanda was about to marry Dr. Doom and then it was implied that he really only wanted to be with her because he wanted to take her power from her? Granted, it seemed like he also wanted to do so to help her and help the world, but of course it's still Doom, so you can bet that ego and selfishness were a big part of the reasoning behind this plot as well. Scarlet Witch no longer remembered who she was when her reincarnated son and member of the Young Avengers, Wiccan, came to find her. All she knew was that she loved Victor Von Doom and was ready to marry him, despite the fact that he had kind of manipulated her. Her love was real, but the backstory that she believed she belonged to wasn't. Wanda ended up spurned and mistreated by Doom even after the truth came out, and she still tried to help him. And before we move on to this next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it. It really does help us out, I promise. Number 7, being named Pretender. What could be worse than being referred to as a traitor? Well, how about when Scarlet Witch was referred to as an imposter? This was the new label she was given after it was revealed that she was not actually a mutant but had been led to believe that she was one for most of her life, due to the High Evolutionary disguising her and her twin brother as both mutants after experimenting on them, and apparently giving them powers himself. During the Dawn of X relaunch in an issue of X-Men, we actually see stories being told of Scarlet Witch where young mutants are taught to refer to her as a pretender, someone who posed as a mutant but was not one and could not be trusted. Seems a little unfair considering that Wanda herself did not know her true origin until much later in life. She wasn't lying, she had been manipulated into believing she was truly a mutant and Magneto's daughter. Number 6, death of her family. Even in the MCU, Wanda has a tragic origin story. In the cinematic universe, she and her brother Pietro were orphaned at a young age after they managed to survive an attack that collapsed their apartment. Their parents were killed in the explosion that decimated their home, but they survived after a second missile landed but did not explode. However, this experience would go on to haunt them for the rest of their days, with the name on the missile being burned into their memories for years to come. And that name, of course, was Stark, which is why when we first meet the Maximoff twins in Age of Ultron, they are enemies and not allies of the Avengers. Number 5, having Magneto for a father. At least for the time she did. While in the comics, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are no longer considered the children of Magneto, they still had him as a father for many years and across many alternate Earths as well. While Magneto might be good with magnetizing, he is not very good at parenting. Magneto is usually a pretty strict father who has demanded much from his children over the years. I think Wanda, in terms of having a caring parent, was actually better off with her sentient cow mom that the High Evolutionary created. Number 4, spell backfire. Even when Wanda tries to do good, she can't catch a break. In the X-Men Empire series tie-in, Scarlet Witch seeks to right her wrongs by bringing back all those mutants lost in the massacre at Genosha. She is trying to atone for her past and all the harm that she has brought to mutant kind. But poor Wanda can't seem to catch a break. Her ritual to revive the dead backfires and instead simply turns those that she's trying to bring back into zombie mutants, instead of bringing them, fully back to life. To make matters worse, we later find out that Doctor Strange warned her against trying to make amends for her sins this way, telling her she couldn't do what had already been done. This made Wanda think that she simply needed to shift her focus instead of realizing that she needed to actually forge new paths as opposed to undoing old tragedies. Number 3, Vision's death. Going back to the MCU for a moment, one of the worst things that happened to Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch was the death of Ultron in Infinity War. Wanda had to kill her synthezoid lover herself after Thanos showed up to attack Wakanda during an attempted procedure to safely remove the Mind Stone from Vision, attempted by Black Panther's brilliant sister, the Princess Shuri. As the procedure was cut short and everyone was pulled into the fray, Thanos was on his way to claim that stone when Viz asked Wanda to destroy it, and by extension destroy him. She initially refused but reluctantly agreed when Viz pressed her and insisted that she wouldn't and couldn't hurt him with her powers, and that all he felt when she used them on him was her. No pain, just her. Aw, so cute. Through tears, Scarlet Witch used her powers to destroy the stone, only to watch Thanos show up and use the Time Stone to rewind time, bring Vision back to life, so that he could destroy him by ripping the Mind Stone out of his head very painfully. Yikes. Number 2, possessed by CHTHON. This is one of those times that Wanda was made a villain truly without any of her own intent steering her there. Wanda was actually marked by CHTHON at birth to act as the Elder God's vessel, should he find a way to return. CHTHON would actually succeed in possessing Wanda and using her to return on more than one occasion, though the first time around was probably the worst, when Mordred summoned CHTHON via a ritual, allowing the god to basically take hold of Wanda and leaving the Avengers powerless against his will. Fortunately, the disaster that would be CHTHON's return was averted before the ritual could be fully completed. Thank goodness for dolls with parts of Wanda's soul in them. That's what happened. Number 1, losing her children. If you were to ask Wanda what one of the worst things that ever happened to her was, I'm sure she would likely answer the loss of her children. Although she would get her 2 twin boys, Billy and Tommy, back when their souls were basically reborn into our world, reincarnating them, she would never really get back the family that she had initially willed into existence. Using her power and from her desire, Wanda made it possible for her and Vision to have children together, and Wanda gave birth to 2 twin boys. However, when others learned that they weren't real and that their existence was kind of making reality unstable, they forced Scarlet Witch to confront the truth, temporarily destroying or displacing her children. Since they weren't really fully destroyed, because they kind of did come back, but just in a really weird comic book way. You might think Wanda has had it bad in life, and of course, as we've discussed, you'd be right. But one of the things that makes Scarlet Witch such a great match for Vision in a weird way is that both have suffered their share of emotional and physical trauma, in some cases even causing trauma to each other. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. We've talked about Wanda Maximoff's more tragic moments both on the screen and in the comics, and now it is time to talk about Vision's. And wow, is there a lot to unpack here as we count down the top 10 worst things that happened to Vision. And I thought Wanda had daddy issues. Yikes. Let's get right into it. Number 10, Stan Lee's ire. Initially, Vision wasn't loved by all at Marvel's offices. In fact, Marvel legend Stan Lee hated the look and the name of the character apparently when he was first created in 1968 by John Buscema and Roy Thomas. Apparently, Stan complained to Roy about the choice of color for the android, not liking the look of his bright red appearance, and also felt the name was not a good fit, not strong enough for the character. Today, his appearance has become iconic, and we think nothing of it. But back when he was first created, it wasn't just with comic book characters that his existence was considered controversial. Number 9, death of his first creator. Despite the fact that we often attribute Vision's existence to Ultron, he wasn't the only one involved in his creation process. And no, I'm not talking about Tony Stark here. Professor Phineas Horton was forcefully recruited by Ultron into helping him create the synthezoid we later came to know as the Vision. Vision, in fact, was originally given the memories of Professor Horton's previous android creation, which brought on the rage of Ultron, who had specifically told Horton to wipe those memories. He's like, you do it or you're dead. And Horton was like, we'll see. Ultron, of course, did kill the professor though, creating probably one of the first tragic moments in Vision's life to come about. At the time, the synthezoid mourned the life of his creator and swore to get revenge on Ultron. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you are enjoying this video and you want more like it, talking about Wanda or Vision or both of them together, oh, romantic moments, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out on the channel. Number 8, no sense of normalcy. Despite the fact that he might seem cold and seems to embrace his synthetic nature, Vision actually constantly strives to fit in. When Wanda and Vision first got married in the comics, they both sought to find normalcy together by settling down in a suburban neighborhood. Oh, it's so nice. Similar to what we've seen the couple attempt in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the Disney Plus show WandaVision. Yeah, if you like WandaVision and you want to sort of read more things that maybe have inspired it, this is a miniseries you're going to want to read. The two of them, however, it seems were never fated to have a normal life, and try as they might, strange events always seemed to disrupt their attempts and lurk around every single corner. For an example of what I'm talking about, you need not look further than the first issue of their miniseries together from the 80s, The Vision and Scarlet Witch. Seriously though, check out this miniseries. On Halloween, a quiet night in quickly turns into something out of a nightmare, ending with a visit from Scarlet Witch's often villainous then father, Magneto. So it becomes more of a nightmare, I imagine. Number 7, being controlled. The smallest spoilers ahead for WandaVision if you know nothing about it, but mostly this part is pretty safe as we'll just be focusing kind of on the premise of the show and what we know of it so far based on what has been implied in the episodes. So it's more of like a, if you know the show, you probably know this. In WandaVision, it's implied that Scarlet Witch, Wanda herself, is in complete control of everything going on in Westview, including Vision's appearance and existence there. After all, as we talked about before, Vision's appearance there likely means that Wanda manipulated him and brought him back to life, possibly even reanimating his lifeless corpse. Yikes. As the show unfolds, Vision becomes more suspicious of his life in Westview and Wanda and her involvement not just in it, but in manipulating it as well with her reality-altering powers. Also, I never noticed this before, but Westview's name actually seems to be a reference to the initial of the main characters of the show and the show title itself. Westview, WV, WandaVision, WV. Interesting. Also, it's weird that it took me so long to notice that, but I just noticed it today, so I was looking for all kinds of other explanations as to what Westview meant. I never thought about like the initials. Number 6, from the Torch to Wonder Man. The first Human Torch was not actually Johnny Storm, but was an android created by Professor Phineas Horton himself. Ultron, wanting to make his own such creation, kidnapped the professor and forced him to build an android being for Ultron's own purposes, which we talked about a little bit earlier. The professor, of course, modeled the synthezoid after his own creation, but a little too closely for Ultron's liking, as I said, bestowing the Human Torch's memories as well to the creation we'd later come to know as Vision. Brought to life, this being attacked Ultron, who had killed the professor as punishment for his betrayal. Unfortunately, Torch Vision, this version of Vision, was no match for Ultron, and in the end he actually ended up being reprogrammed by Ultron to follow his orders and was given the brain patterns of Wonder Man. Nothing against Wonder Man, by the way, but sharing brain patterns with that hero would cause lots of weirdness for Vision and for Scarlet Witch as well later on down the line. I feel like if you get to pick who you want to share brain patterns with, Wonder Man's not at the top of the list. Also, it's really weird that like Wonder Man's brain patterns were just lying around Hank Pym's lab in like a little recorder device. It's like, why did you have those, Hank Pym? What's going on? Number 5, no one to help. This point has some more specific spoilers for the latest episode of WandaVision, episode 6. So if you haven't gotten there yet, you maybe want to skip this one if you want to avoid spoilers, or if you haven't seen it but you're like, I'm living through the spoilers, man, which is fine. In the latest episode of WandaVision, it's Halloween in Westview as we proceed along our sitcom timeline into the world of basically kind of a Malcolm in the Middle inspired era, which aired actually in the 2000s, despite this episode having a very 90s feel, and despite that series having a 90s feel. Trying to solve the mystery of what's really going on in Westview, Vision lies to Wanda about not being able to join her and the kids trick-or-treating, due to being on duty for neighborhood watch. Now, in reality, he actually spends the evening investigating Westview and eventually finds the town's reality warping barrier, which he attempts to cross, not knowing that this will likely end up killing him. As outside of this altered reality, which it's hinted at is numbered as 2800 in the MCU, despite the fact that I think that number's already taken in the comics, Vision is in fact dead. When he moves to leave the town, we watch as he struggles against the magical barrier, which obviously very much wants to keep him within town limits. S.W.O.R.D watches as he attempts to move into their world, seeing him fall to pieces, slowly dissolving in front of them. And as a handcuffed Darcy Lewis shouts for them to do something. Like, help this man. but that doesn't end up happening. They just run. In the end, it's up to Wanda to save the day when Billy alerts her that he senses that his dad is in danger. Wiccan to the rescue. Number 4, manipulated into being a villain. I really do feel for Vision. Most of the most terrible things that have happened to him in the comics or otherwise are honestly my worst nightmare, which is being controlled by other people. In this case, we're talking about when he was sent in to kill the Avengers and seemingly in some kind of murderous trance. Once the team attempted to reason with him, it became apparent that this synthezoid enemy wasn't all he appeared to be, and in fact that he might not truly be acting of his own volition. In the end, Vision would end up becoming an ally to the Avengers, fighting against his instincts to do them harm. They'd actually help him by deprogramming his murderous urges, and he would eventually go on to join the Avengers outright, fighting many times against his creator and father, Ultron. Many times. Many times. Ultron never stays dead. Number 3, infected with a HYDRA virus. During the events of Secret Empire, Steve Rogers would end up having his whole life history rewritten and be revealed as a long-time sleeper agent for HYDRA. Our heroes would, however, find out too late about Rogers' true allegiances, and so Captain America would become Captain Hydra, or Hydra Supreme, and would take over the United States of America for the glory of Hydra. But he would also end up recruiting some of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, including Scarlet Witch and Vision. But how did he convince them to join the side of evil? Well, he didn't. For Wanda, Hydra actually awoke CHTHON within her in order to take control of her body and make use of her powers. And if you want to learn more about CHTHON and that whole thing, you can check out the worst things that happened to Wanda's list, where we talk about that a bit more. For Vision, being a synthezoid, they merely infected him with a virus. That was easy. And although Vision tried to fight it, he remained unable to break free and fight against Hydra until near the end of the event. Like the second last issue, I believe, in the main one. Secret Empire number 9. Number 2, death. While those who only knew Vision from the MCU might think of his tear-jerking demise in Endgame, comic fans know that a fate worse than being destroyed, at least the first time around, awaited him in the comics. Here, instead of Wanda destroying him at his own request, urging her on with words of affirmation and love, Vision ends up being controlled against his will by her, which leads to him ending up in a direct conflict that he doesn't actually want any part of, which ultimately leads to his very gruesome death. Not only does he melt and vomit up silver pods, which transform into Ultron bots, but overkill comes into play when She-Hulk then decides to go into a rage and ends up tearing him down the middle, which is a pretty epic and permanent kind of on-panel death. Although, of course, even if you get ripped down the middle, that's probably not the end of you, because comics. Vision is still a synthetic being, and he can be recreated. So don't worry, he would be rebuilt, and he would return once more. But what a death to come back from. Number 1, weaponized. During the events of Avengers Disassembled, which led right into House of M, Wanda ended up suffering from a mental break, and as such ended up turning on her fellow Avengers. You'd think Vision, being one of the Avengers who, is married to Wanda, would be safe, but no. Wanda ended up not only getting him killed, but it was the way in which she did it, I think, that just really cut him deep. She didn't just put him in the right places to be torn apart by She-Hulk, but she actually turned him into a weapon to be used against his friends and teammates, the Avengers. Vision actually warned them when he came to them that he was no longer in control of his body before vomiting up those pods, which turned into Ultron robot drones, who then attacked the Avengers after their mansion had already been attacked. This was just a real bad day all around for the whole team. When Vision returned to life and Wanda much later came to ask for forgiveness, it would actually be this memory that would prevent him from being able to forgive his wife, Scarlet Witch. He was like, I can forgive the fact that you had a mental break, but you literally turned me against my friends and made me hurt them, and some of them died. Pretty crazy. What are some of the worst things that you think Vision has lived through? Who would you love to see Vision team up with? What are some of your most favorite stories featuring our favorite synthezoid hero? Let us know in the comments below. And also let us know if you want a part 2 to this list, because we didn't even talk about Tom King's Vision on here, and whew, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there too. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host, Amanda McKnight, saying thanks for watching and reminding you, as always, to stay nerdy, YouTube.